something called the Stanford experiment, that when you split people, even though they knew that these were kids in their class, when they told the kids in the class that there was one group who were going to be prisoners and one group that were the guards, they forgot that their own friends, their own classmates were just classmates. And it actually went on very quickly, that if you put this garb on, I've got a crowning touch here that I've got to put on, which is our speaker, Omar, has already left, I think, but it was his point, war is terrorism. There's a very famous quote that says, a poor man's war is terrorism. A rich man's terrorism is war. So, sorry about that, billionaires. I'd like to talk today. I can talk about 9/11. I know there's the things. I was a whistleblower. I was in the FBI for 24 years. And towards the end of my time, I taught constitutional law in the FBI to the agents and to police officers, because if they mess up, in the old days, before 9/11, I should say, in the old days before 9/11, if you messed up and you didn't wait long enough at the door in a search and seizure, or your warrant had a flaw, even a minor flaw in the write-up of your affidavit, or if you gave Miranda rights and you missed a word or two in the Miranda rights, you could lose all your evidence in court. So the Constitution had very strict requirements in the Bill of Rights, and because of that, the FBI decided, even before I joined, I think in the 70s, that they needed to give this comprehensive legal training. So I usually talk on constitutional rights, civil liberties, and I can take questions afterwards. All the things that the last two speakers said, especially about top secret America, about the warrantless spying, about torturing false confessions, knowingly torturing false confessions out of captives, some of whom were completely innocent, and basically just doing the false confessions in order to get the fodder to attack Iraq. Derek isn't here, but I mean, these lies that went into a war, unjustified, illegal war on Iraq, some of them, not only from Scooter Libby, complete lies. He leaked that the aluminum tubes were designed for enrichment. He leaked that to the New York Times. She was privy to it. She was part of it, Judith Miller. These were outright lies. The deception is just incredible when you know the truth. People often ask me, how can I live with what I know? I mean, it's hard, but the only way I can is to continue to speak out. But today, I want to speak out about something completely different. And again, if we talk about, questions, I want to talk about, and it's a great transition between our little skit about what's being told the United States and how the public is being sold on war and on repression, internal repression, on our own, actually, even economic miseries. You get to the situation like in Wisconsin, where a pretty large percentage of people are voting against their own economic interests even. These are even poor people. They said 38% of union members voted against union. So how does that work? How can you get mass, large groups of people to believe that war is peace, slavery is freedom, and what's the other one? Something is strength. Weakness is strength. How can you get peaceniks now? Actually, now this is even happening. There are human rights and peace and justice organizations who are beginning to shill for war. How can you do this? This is what George Orwell talked about. How can you get people to believe we have to bomb? I mean, I remember after Vietnam, that was a joke when they used to say, that was a true statement. Somebody in Vietnam said, we got to bomb the village to save it. That actually came out. And people said, well, isn't that stupid? And people used to laugh about it. But in Libya, for instance, the sell in Libya was that Gaddafi was a bad guy, and there were human rights violations in Libya, and we had to bomb Libya in order to help the human rights there. That's very similar arguments being made with Syria now. So, how does this work? How does this work on people's minds to basically dupe and fool them? Well, I listened to Sean Hannity, Fox News. Derek is absolutely right. Listen to every source. And actually don't listen always to people you don't agree with, because you've got to understand how the propaganda works. Well, so I came up with I'll just give you a few of them. There's lots of different things. The CIA, by the way, and other government agencies in top secret America, going all the way back to the 20s, there was a guy named, he was Sigmund Freud's nephew, Bernays, Edward Bernays. And he figured out how, and he was really kind of the founder, the father of all of our TV ads. All of these commercial ads that get you to buy Charmin bathroom tissue. His name was Edward Bernays. He was a nephew of Sigmund Freud, smart psychologist, and he figured out how to manipulate people. Then from the 20s, the CIA picks up on this in the 50s and the 60s. They did drug experiments. They even killed their own scientists, giving them LSD, thinking they could manipulate people that way. They experimented with solitary, what they call sensory deprivation in the 50s and the 60s. There's a book by a professor in Wisconsin and this is all true. This is no conspiracy. These are all true. They actually, in order to experiment on how they could break people down in the 50s and the 60s, the CIA scientists, and they had departments in all of our colleges and universities, even Yale. They put people in coffins. Well, guess what one of the main torture tactics was after 9/11? One of the very first things is putting you in a coffin. They put hoods over your face, even gloves on your hand. You can't see, you can't hear, you can't even feel with your fingers in this little coffin. And they found that their own people that would volunteer for the experiment could only last, an hour or two in this kind of environment. You're going to go crazy and you know what? There's no marks on you afterwards. Here they've tortured you through sensory deprivation. Well, this actually now occurs. This all comes back when they realized their own scientists would break real quickly. That was kind of the end of the experiments. So the CIA has been working on this a long time. There was a strong law or rule that they could only do these things on foreign populations. Okay, so here in the exceptionalist America, we all applauded because we wanted our United States, there's different groups out there. We wanted to win the hearts and minds of people around the world, so we were okay with that. If they dropped leaflets, one of the things, dropping leaflets, give up. I mean, a lot of lying. They will tell populations, foreign populations, that their leader has given up, all these different things. They're part of psych operations. Now recently, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, the CIA now has a think tank called the CIA Red Cell. And the CIA Red Cell is this new think tank internal in the CIA, and they had gotten data from the State Department's intelligence group. That's one of the 16 public agencies that does intelligence. It's called the INR is the acronym. They had done polls in France and Germany amongst the people. And they had found out that the French and the Germans were like 80% against the Afghanistan war. And because their troops were starting to die in different reasons. So they found a high majority. And so they said, this bodes bad. They said, well, we're safe so far. The politicians in France and Germany have been able to escalate the troops along the lines of what Obama wanted. So far, that's been okay because the people, French and Germans, have been apathetic. But what happens this summer, we are expecting a bloody summer with this escalation, which actually came true. So this is all in this thought piece called, if you Google, you can Google CIA Red Cell Memorandum, and you'll find a PDF. It's about 4 or 5 pages long. So, and then they went beyond finding this out. They said, well, how can we keep those people from still backing their politicians to keep the deployment in Afghanistan? And the expert CIA psychological operation guy came back and he said, well, there's two different ways. The French and German have slightly different views on this. The German are real pragmatic, and they don't want to help other countries. And so we have to tell them that they're getting something for their money. But the French, they have this real secular country, and we need to tell the French that the women in Afghanistan are being abused. And which, of course, you know, to be honest, in the current situation, obviously everyone knows the wearing burqas and all the rest. So we will bring Afghan women, and there will be testimonials. Okay? So you fast forward, and then what happened? Very quickly, now this memo, by the way, leaked to WikiLeaks. And so in about 2 weeks after they wrote it, it leaked. But you had your Time magazine right after this that showed the picture of the young girl that's missing the nose. Now just recently, I was one of the people protesting NATO in Chicago. And there were at least 10,000 of us there, and maybe more. And we saw a billboard, and the billboard had Afghan women in burqas, and the thing said, "Come to the NATO Shadow Summit," and the line said, NATO, this was a NATO Shadow Summit put on by Amnesty International, USA, and it said, NATO, keep the progress going.
Oh my God.
By Amnesty International. So, I don't know if anybody here knows Colonel Ann Wright, retired, who is a veteran for peace, and she's one of the leading, she's a Smedley Butler, she's a female Smedley Butler, and she and I decided to hop into a taxi. And we actually, at the time, because we were all ready to protest that afternoon, we actually had signs, really appropriate signs. One of our friends' signs said, NATO kills girls. So, and she had pictures of young Afghan women. So I had one that said, NATO's bombing is not humanitarian. And I didn't know I was going to this thing, but I just had that one because, so we hopped into a taxi, got there, and went in, and the keynote speaker at Amnesty International's Keep the Progress, NATO, was Madeleine Albright. Okay, and we actually walked in at the same time as the U.S. State Department sent its female ambassador at large. Her name was Milan Verver. She's the U.S. ambassador at large on women's issues, and she's in our State Department. We walked in with her, and of course, Ann Wright was in the State Department. She was also 20-some years in the State Department. So I'm not sure if she recognized her, but she started asking her questions as we walked in, and this Milan Verver just gave us a glance to kill. So we decided to go listen for a while, and then as a result of this, I've written a piece that's out on Huffington and Consortium and Michael Moore and Op-Ed News. It's if you Google it, it's called Amnesty Shilling for U.S. NATO Wars. Now, unbelievable. Where have we come, baby? On Mother's Day, there was a precursor to this. On Mother's Day, I wrote one. Let's see, what's the saying? Baby, how far have you come from Julia Ward Howe's Peace Day? Because Mother's Day was supposed to be a peace day. And there's this notion, and actually it's a liberal notion, that women, I don't know if we counted here if we had more women than men, but there's this idea that if women got power in the world, if women ruled the world, women are kinder, gentler, we want to be mothers, I'm a mother and grandmother, we're raging grandmothers, that we somehow would be more nurturing, and that we would do these silly macho things that men were doing. But when you look out at right now, and there's maybe some reasons for this, you see that the 5 most powerful women in our country, beginning with Madeleine Albright, most powerful woman, Secretary of State, highest level of any woman yet. Beginning with Madeleine Albright, then Condi Rice. By the way, Condi and Madeleine are closely connected. Madeleine Albright's father was Condi Rice's mentor. Yeah, we think there's different parties. They're very closely connected. Then you get to Hillary, the third Secretary of State. I am guessing that because having a female for Secretary of State, and you can go around the world and try to bully and try to, like in the case of Iran, you know, all these negotiations, it seems to work real well. People fall for it. They think the female is not a war hawk. Okay, let's say Amy Klobuchar, same thing. Unbelievable. Her voting record is a war hawk, but she's a female, so people don't really realize this. So there's two secretaries of state who are what I call wannabes right now. They're the ones that, because Hillary's leaving, so there's going to be a new one. And the two names that have been mentioned are Susan Rice, who is our UN ambassador, and the second one is Samantha Power. Samantha Power is called the humanitarian interventionist, and she is the chair right now of Obama's new quote-unquote atrocity prevention board that was started by Madeleine Albright. Okay, so here's the big lie. It was alluded to a little bit, but it's part of this. It's a form of utilitarian reasoning. When you tell people that you want a good outcome, okay, so we all want women's rights. We all want genocides to end and no atrocities. If there was some way that we could end the fighting in Syria, we would want that to happen. Think about this. If there was a way to find a ticking time bomb and disrupt it without preventing that act of terrorism, wouldn't we all want it? Why do you think a high majority of people in the United States right now condone, the polls show, condone and favor the use of torture? Right now in our culture, and actually religious people, they've left now, it's too bad, but the Catholics are worse. Of all the religious people are worse in favoring torture than secular people, and of all the religions, Catholics are even worse than Lutherans and etc. So how did this one, if they had done this poll, these latest polls that show favoring of torture before 9/11, it would not have been 50-some% favor the use of torture. So how did we get here? Well, people watched the TV show, Jack Bauer, 24, every single plot started out with a ticking time bomb, and at the end, again, this is a concocted fictional outcome, he saves the day by torturing and use of cruelty. We now, one of the major propaganda techniques is getting people to believe that the law, the Constitution, your Bill of Rights, even basic human norm principles like the Golden Rule and prohibition against torture, that doesn't even have to be, cruel and inhumane punishment is the 8th Amendment. But prohibiting torture has existed forever. You know, they call it jus cogens. Habeas corpus and due process goes back to the Magna Carta. 1215. We've had due process instead of a president being investigator, judge, jury, and executioner. Now, most of the country, they said 80% of the country is okay with Obama being investigator. You know, the executive branch is already the investigator, and they're already the executioner. So two of those exist in the criminal, in a judicial process. The two middle ones, judge and jury. Judge and juries don't exist anymore in our system. I've been on many radio shows since the Obama's kill list article came out in the New York Times, and you know, my main point on these radio shows, because I don't get that much time, is I say, all you law professors, lawyers, judges, anybody involved in the legal profession had better ask to see the memo. There's a secret memo that justifies Obama's kill list.